And 2 days later, you slide the resignation letter across the desk to the, in your chain of command. And I'm like, now I got to figure out what I'm doing.
Welcome back to the Missoula podcast, episode 75. Matt Mellott, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
What is something about flying F-18s that Brandon and I would have no idea about, like the excitement of it or the challenge of it? What's that like to fly one of those?
I'd say the thing that was the most, that's hard to describe is when, so flying F-18s, it's designed for an aircraft carrier and to land on it. And so landing at night was the most amazing and terrifying thing ever, because especially when there's no horizon or light, you feel like you are tumbling into the abyss because you can't tell the difference between the ocean and the sky. And so it's just black. And then there's these little lights where the runway's at. And so you feel like you're tumbling, even though you're, flying normally. So that part is like, I don't know how else to describe it. Otherwise, you just feel like you're falling into the ocean, but you're supposed to like maintain focus and fly this perfect pass and land on the 3-wire and all this other stuff. And so that part, and then also the getting shot off the front of the boat at night.
I was gonna say those videos, those reels of getting launched off the boat.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's so violent and so like, there's nothing that I can think of that compares to it.
What was it like the first time where it was?
You're like
you
screaming
weren't learning,
to yourself.
You weren't a student. It's like this was you.
You're pretty much screaming to yourself because you're solo you never have an instructor with you when you first go to the boat. Like you do a million runs like on land, on like basically a mock-up of the aircraft carrier on the like a normal runway. And then, but when you actually go out to the boat, you're by yourself. So
more nerves or adrenaline?
Both. I mean, you're terrified, definitely. But it is, the most amazing feelings. I'm pretty sure I screamed. And what you try not to do is hit the little mic switch, so you're not like transmitting that you're screaming and how awesome it is and how much of a how scared you are, I guess. But you get, I guess, during the daytime, it's like. You could get to where I wouldn't say comfortable, but it was like manageable. Nighttime, pretty terrifying. So,
how do you feel about Top Gun?
The movie?
The movie.
Yeah.
Pretty accurate. Like, is that what life's like?
I mean, some of the terminology was accurate. Okay. Like you never fly that close to each other. Like tactically, like everybody get shot down. And then when they would shoot the missiles and stuff, it's just like you get one pull and that's it. And then those things are not circling around you.
So when you watch that movie, it was like, yes, I love this, or is this like,
no, it was awesome. Yeah, we took our entire company to it when it came out. Talking to, it was like that stuff's like the best marketing thing ever, for the Marine Corps and the Navy.
Just the soundtrack alone.
Right.
Quality.
I mean, growing up as, seeing that as a 6-year-old or whatever is like that.
So is that where it started? Was it a dream for you as a kid?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I want to fly fighter jets.
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, that's as long as I can remember.
So as long as you can remember, you don't remember the moment where you're like, I want to be a pilot?
I don't know if it was, I know I watched Top Gun 1 million times, probably like other kids like me, growing up and thinking that was pretty awesome. And then I got to school to college and I was trying to sign up for the Air Force because I didn't know what I was doing. And so I'm like, Air Force, they fly planes, they have fighter planes, right? So that's what you do. And my eyes weren't good enough. And so at the time, the Air Force didn't accept like PRK or LASIK or anything like that. And so it was like, you're going to be an engineer or something like that, or some sort of ground job. And I'm like, nope, not interested in that. And then when was it? I don't know. I was walking through, I went to Penn State University and there's this student union building and I was walking through the hall and there's some, Marine in his service Deltas or whatever. And he's got a table set up, a little stand. It's got a picture of a Cobra helicopter and an F-18. And I walk up to him like, what's that? I didn't know the Marines did that. And he's like, then like a total sucker. He like got me. He's like, yeah, they fly F-18s. They got a bunch of squadrons, but you probably wouldn't make it. And like, or something to that effect, it's basically like, you're not good enough to do this, which is like the Marine Corps' like standard way to pull in suckers like me.
Right.
And they got me for 12 years. So yeah, that's how I was like, oh, cool. I didn't know the Marines did this. And so you start running on that track. And I think 6 months later, I was at officer candidate school in Quantico and wondering like, what had I done, cause they make you go through all the boot camp and like train you to be some of the infantry stuff. And they're just like, oh man,
you've said so much there that I want to jump onto. Let's go back to as a kid growing up.
Yeah.
Did you have family in the military? Where'd you grow up? What was home life like?
Yeah. I grew up in near Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So Amish country. And my dad was in the Army, but just for 4 years, like during the Vietnam timeframe. And then my oldest brother, Don, is a Ranger, or he was in the Army, he was in the Rangers. And so that was my exposure to it. And I remember when I was talking to Don, he's 14 years older than I am. So I was talking to him and, saying about the military. He's like, whatever you do, he's like, don't join the Army or the Marine Corps. He's like, go be smart, like join the Air Force or the Navy or something. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then, when I told him that I was joining the Marine Corps, he's like, why do you not listen? Why? He's like, why do you want to be a bullet sponge? I don't understand. So, because he had done all this stuff in the Army and whatnot. So that was my exposure to the it was not aviation related, but it was military. So Army.
Growing up in Pennsylvania, was there anything that you did that helped prepare you for the military?
Not really. I mean, I'd say the one thing I did was I ran cross country, and which is a miserable sport. Why people do it, I do not know. But what it does is it trains you to enjoy pain, and
run from bullets.
Run from bullets. But like you would get to when I got to OCS, like the thought of running 5 or 8 miles was like not a mental block for me, and it was for a lot of guys because you're just like, whatever. Like we've I've done that 100 times, and so I think that was like the one thing I don't think I enjoyed cross country a single time I did it. But it was like my family had done it. And so it was kind of expected that you did. And then come to find out, years later, like, oh, well, it's actually not that, like doing the physical part of the Marine Corps was not that bad because you just had this, like the mental block is gone. And so anyway, that was probably I'd say the single best thing I did for, that prepared me for the military.
What was the most mentally challenging part about being in the Marines?
I think I mean, the initial training side of it is it's just so different from what everybody else does or what you grew up doing and like how they approach everything. And then you kind of now looking back, 25 years later, you're just like, there's a reason they did every single thing they did, like to train you in like the officer candidate school and the basic school and all this other stuff is like, there's a reason for every single thing they do. And it's accepting the fact that there actually is a reason, even though it doesn't appear to be a reason for why they have you, why they're yelling at you and doing all this other stuff early on. And so I think that part, I don't know how you prepare yourself for it other than just you go there and you they used to say, press the I believe button, and you just press the I believe button and you may not know why, you just hit the I believe button and that's what you do. And then you just kind of move through the structure and start to understand it a little bit better. And there's pretty good reason.
So you couldn't get into the Air Force because of eyesight. Mm-hmm. You got into the Marines.
Because at the time, the Marines and Navy, they would allow you to get PRK, which is like the precursor or something like that to LASIK or whatever it was. And so I was able to go get the eye surgery. And so that is how I was able to qualify for it. So I could get into the Air Force in a ground capacity, but I wouldn't get a flight spot. And so Marine Corps had this program where they basically would guarantee you a spot in flight school if you pass these tests, like these kind of like personality test and some written test or something like that. So as long as you pass those, met the physical requirements, like you had a spot, didn't guarantee that you'd become a pilot. And so I was like, all right, that's sweet. So let's go for it. And so
you said you went to Penn State. What was it that drew you into Penn? What'd you go to school for?
Yeah, it was all family. I mean, it's like all my brothers went to Penn State. Actually, my first semester, I went to University of Delaware, so I was an outcast. And that's where I was at, trying to join like Air Force ROTC and all this other stuff. And then I transferred to Penn State for my second semester in my freshman year, and then graduated from there. So that was.
What'd you get a degree in?
Real estate, believe it or not. I know it's a real major. But if that's what everybody's like, are you serious? Like, I thought these guys were,
How did you decide on doing real estate?
I don't know.
In
So,
college?
family friend got me a book on real estate. I think my freshman year or something like that. I can't, man, I wish I remember the name of the book, but, I read it. I'm like, this sounds awesome. Like you just, you make something from nothing and you kind of come up with an idea or you buy a house and fix it up or turn it into 2 units or something like that. And I don't know, something about that was appealing. So, started running down that path, and then Penn State happened to have, at the time, there was like almost no schools that had a real estate degree. But Penn State had it. And so, did that. It's very like, development oriented. And so like towards building new stuff and investment and that sort of thing.
You said 12 years in the Marines?
12 years of active duty and then another 3 of reserve.
Okay. And were you dabbing into real estate, investment properties while you were in the service?
Yeah, I did. I had bought a couple of investment properties prior to getting in the Marine Corps. Because there was a gap between when I graduated and then when active duty started. Because after 9/11, there was like this big rush of people that signed up. And so they had this backlog. And so you signed up, were accepted, commissioned, like all this kind of stuff. And then there was like months before you could actually get into the next iteration of training. And so I was working in real estate and, bought a house, and it was disaster, like disaster in terms of like, fixing it up and thinking you're going to flip it and things going to be great. And I learned exactly what not to do. But then, so yeah, that was the house that I bought. That was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And then when I got into the military, like I think my first one, or the next one I bought was in like Pensacola, Florida, because there's a base there. So I'd live in it, fix it up, and then rent it out, go buy the next one. And I think I did like 3 in Pensacola. And then Texas and other places that were stationed. So that's how I got into it. So you kind of run it in the background, which sounded like a great idea until you're on the other side of the world, deployed and trying to manage properties from the other side of the world. Not such a great idea unless you got a really good property manager.
And so is that what you learned real quick? You needed property managers?
Yeah. You need somebody who's like there. My least favorite, I probably got a lot now, but my least favorite real estate memory is I was in 2007. I was in Iraq, and the only time I've ever had to evict somebody was the tenant on this duplex in Pensacola. It was the upstairs tenant stopped paying rent, and on the way out, so I, coordinating with like an attorney and all this other stuff from the other side of the world in a combat zone, and so we finally get her out, but on the way out, this lady ripped the pipe where the washer connected, ripped the pipe out. So for half a day, it's running water down into the unit beneath, so the unit below. And so in Florida or whatever, it's pretty high deductibles on your insurance because of whatever. And so I remember you get combat pay or whatever when you're in a combat zone. And I remember having to explain to my wife that we were taking all of the combat pay that I'd saved, and we're going to go fix this place in Pensacola. We're not going to go on a vacation. We're not going to like invest in something. We're going to go fix like toilets and walls and stuff, pay a contractor. So she was like really excited about, the whole real estate investment concept at that point. So, that was a good fun memory.
At what point in your life did you get married? Was that before in college or in the military?
Yeah, in the military. So I'd met my wife in Pensacola. So I was in flight school, and she was in at college there, and so I met her. So that was 2006. We got married. Yeah. So yep. Yeah.
What's
19 years.
What are some of the challenges of being married in active duty?
It's brutal. I mean, it's once you get into what they call an operational unit, so you're deploying. So you go through all this training. It takes like 3 years to get trained, and then you get to an actual like gun squadron. So deploying F-18 squadron, and you are either doing workups, which is like training to go deploy, or you're deployed. And so that process is you're gone a lot. Even when you're home, you're not home because you don't know anything. Even when you show up to the squadron after 3 years of training, you still know nothing. And so you have like, you're studying, and I was by no means a quick learner by any stretch. And so it just took an exorbitant amount of like studying and that sort of thing. So that part's hard of like you're home, but you're not home. And then you go away for 7 months at a time on deployments. And so with, that's hard enough without kids, but then you have, I think for my first deployment, we had one kid, and then every deployment after that, we had at least one more kid. So it was, it's pretty tough. I mean, that was one of the main factors for getting out of the Marine Corps was, it's one deployment after the other, at least at that time. And that was kind of not the sole reason, but that's definitely a major motivating reason for why I got out.
2 questions wrapped up in one here, Matt. What is one of the coolest places in the world you have seen that most people don't get to visit? And then 2, where's the sketchiest place in the world that you never want to go back to?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Outside of the Pensacola rental property.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough neighborhood that I bought in there. I got to spend some time in Japan, which was super cool. Just, it's different, but also it's so well run in a lot of respects, and everything's neat, and there's these nice little gardens, and the architecture is interesting, and so I thought Japan was extremely interesting. I would love to go back there, take my family back there. And then sketchiest place, I mean, we didn't do a whole lot of off-base stuff in Iraq, some other countries in that area that we were stationed at, and then we were sometimes allowed to go into town, which was a bad idea for a bunch of, Americans with buzz cuts that stood out like a sore thumb. And so I've got a video in Manama, which is in Bahrain, and we are driving through this town, and we somehow ended up in what they call a black flag district, which is, it's like Sunni and Shia. And we were in the kind of disaffected, is a majority, but it was like the disaffected majority. And so you would stay out of those zones. And somehow we managed to get into this black flag district. And I remember I don't even know how we had a car. I think we rented it somewhere. And we were driving in, like there's these, women there that are fully clad in black, and they were like waving us away, like go away, like get out of here. And you could see the black flags flying. I think I have a video of it. And so that was, that was pretty sketchy. We're like, are we going to get our heads cut off? Like that's what, you're just going through your head kind of stuff. So poor choices. So I get a lot of those.
Where was home when you came out of the Marines after that 12 years of reserves? Where? So residence. My last duty station was in San Diego. And so I moved here from San Diego when I got out. So that was my last, place where our belongings were held, I guess. So it was a direct move from here to here from San Diego. So why Missoula? How did you get here? I mean, Matt, you were in San Diego. 75 degrees, the breeze.
No, I hear that a lot. Actually, I hear that quite a bit.
Why Missoula, Montana?
Missoula, San Diego is it's big cities go, like does not suck. Like it's a pretty nice place, but it's also expensive. I had a lot of kids.
What's a lot of kids?
6.
You have 6. Okay.
6 children. We had, oh man, this is a long story, but like I'd first come out to Missoula, right after I graduated college, and me and 2 buddies did this road trip and went all the way to the West Coast and drove down the coast and then drove back to Pennsylvania. And so that was during that trip, we stopped in Missoula. I'm like, this place is cool. And then I started coming back to Missoula with my wife every so often for vacation or whatever. So 4 or 5 days at a time. And then, it got to this point where I was in the Marines. I had, 12 years of active duty. Most guys don't quit at 12 years. So they stick with it because you're over halfway to the retirement. And that's like a big draw for a lot of guys. And I just done 3 deployments in rapid succession, basically back to back to back. And so it was like looking for downtime with the family. And long story short is I was actually my orders were to go to Japan, which sounded awesome. But I was going to be most of my time in Okinawa, which is a separate island from where my family would be, which is Iwakuni, which is a separate base, main island. And so when I found that out, I was like, I just several deployments in a row, and then being mostly separated for another 3 years is not gonna work. And so I remember the monitor is the guy that like rates your orders. And so he basically said like, if you don't like it, let's see your letter, your resignation letter. And I'm like, okay. And 2 days later, you just slide the resignation letter across the desk to the, in your chain of command. And I'm like, now I got to figure out what I'm doing. So my wife and I had just been up here to Missoula, and so we're like bouncing around ideas. And I was like, well, I know real estate, more or less, like the basics of it anyway. I don't know a single person in Missoula, Montana. I literally had 406 numbers in my phone, and I don't know, made the decision we're just going to try it. So we moved up here and went from getting paid the 1st and 15th of every month by the government, who can, print their own money. So it's not like you're not going to not get paid, to going into commission-based real estate, where you don't get paid for like the first 4 months. I think I made $0. So that was a unique time, and very, very different. So
how long ago was that? When did you come to Missoula?
2015.
2015.
Yeah. I think my last day of active duty was October 31st of 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Let's jump into rapid fire questions. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Earliest or first initial memory of Missoula?
That road trip coming through here with two buddies and walking through walking by the river near the university. I'm like, this place is awesome. Like, really, really like this place. So sit out. Yep.
Favorite coffee shop?
It was Zootown Brew, and then it shut down. And so I would say secondary is black coffee. Yeah, that one's Spruce.
What's your favorite restaurant?
Mishi Ramen. Michi, however you pronounce it.
I don't know how to say that either. So.
Just
I have a cat named Michi.
The ramen restaurant downtown.
We like it so much, we named one of our cats after it. So,
what zip code do you live in?
59808.
What is the weirdest thing about Missoula to you?
I guess you like adapt to it, but it blew my mind when I got here, and in the summer the town would empty out. I'm like, where's everybody going? Like, what is happening? I guess I'm like, everybody's camping and at the lake. And so I get, maybe that happens probably another place in Montana elsewhere, but that was bizarre to me. And so I'm trying to adjust, but the urge to like work harder because people aren't around and aren't answering, and you're like, oh my, it's going to blow up. Like this, the whole thing's going to melt down, but it's just everybody's at the lake.
True.
Yeah.
We live for our summers here.
Yeah. So that was weird to me. So about Missoula, but
what do you love the most about Missoula?
I think I like I really like that there's trails within 5 minutes in any direction, but I also think the variety of people that are here, of like, you got, all kinds of different people. It is, politically, you've got the extremes going both directions. And so, yeah, it's kind of a unique place. It attracts, there's the people that grew up here. There's people that have come like I did, because you're like, this looks like a cool place to raise kids or to come hang out. And so this interesting little mixing pot of people from all over the place is what I think I like most about it.
Is there a particular book that's made a big impact on your life?
I would say one that I think has given a lot of perspective it's called The Lessons of History by Will Durant. It was just like this famous historian who wrote volumes and volumes and volumes. And it talks about basically how the pendulum of history swings back and forth, and like all these things that happen over and over and over again, and they have like slightly different flavors to them, but they're essentially the same themes that happen over and over and over again. So it's like, maybe not the most practical day-to-day book, but when you step back and look at all the political stuff and just how history unfolds, you're just like, yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense to me, of like why things happen the way they do.
You're not so shocked because you have an idea that's happened
because it's happened 1,000 times before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you come to Missoula, you're going to start your real estate career. Not that you hadn't already bought some investment properties. What would you say was the best crossover between the military and your new career? Like, what were some of the things that you learned in the military that helped you initially as you got started?
Yeah, they're very, I don't know. I mean, they're very different in one respect, because it's like the military has a very defined path for like how your career grows and what you need to do. You need to check this box and have this position, get this fit rep, blah, blah, blah. And like, so it's very defined in that regard. There's SOPs, standard operating procedures for everything. There's Marine Corps orders. Like, you can know the right answers because it's been published somewhere. And then you come to a town you don't know. You have no 4 or 6 numbers in your phone, in a business that you haven't really touched, day to day in like 12 years, whatever it was. And so it is, there's no book on how to like go from zero to figuring out the business stuff. And so I think where the Marine Corps helped is that, the Marine Corps prides themselves on being able to deal with chaos and like, impose order on an unordered environment or a chaotic environment. And to some degree, I think that's what it is. You're just like, you prioritize what's going to kill you first and figure out how to not get killed by that. And then you like systematically can just like add these concentric rings of, protection for yourself or whatever. And so that's, I think the ordering of your thinking and ordering of the priorities that the Marine Corps teaches you, that was very valuable coming into an entrepreneurial like business world that was very different from the structure of the Marine Corps. So that is probably the biggest takeaway, I would say.
I've never been in real estate. I've bought and sold a couple of my own homes.
Sure.
I would imagine the real estate industry is very relationship driven.
It is.
Very
connections,
very who you know. So you come into Missoula, you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
You get your license. What do you do? Where did you start?
The first person I met was a guy named Dan Ermitinger, who owned the Berkshire Hathaway franchise. And so he was the first 4 or 6 number. And then Mike Nugent, who basically ran the company. And so that was the first 2 people I met. And then, read a million books and on what to do, or, trying to figure out what to do. And then ended up going to every networking event, did a ton of free work of where you're just offering to do what we call an evaluator, a broker opinion evaluation, or a broker opinion BOV. And so you basically are going to owners of properties and saying, this is what I think it's worth if you sold it. This is what I think it's worth if you rented it. Here's how I would do it. And you would do that. And a lot of times people would be like, cool, thank you. And they would take it, and they already had a transaction lined up, and you get kind of not used or whatever, but it was like the practice of doing that enough times that A, you get to start to know who people are and what the back history is. And then B, you start to figure out what things are worth very, very quickly from doing that. So it's feels unfruitful for the first, I bet, 2 years of doing that. And then after a while, you're like, oh, I actually know a lot of the people in town, or know about the buildings, or I've been inside of the building, or I had a tenant that I put in that building, or whatever the case is. So it was that part of it of just like calling people, being rejected over and over and over again when you're trying to like offer something of value to them. That is I think the difficult part of it is like, it's not hard to find phone numbers, like, trying to figure out who owns property. That part's not hard. It's the calling them up and having a reason for them to want to talk to you, and figuring that part out. That was challenging. So,
well, I think most of the time when people hear that somebody's in real estate, the assumption's residential.
Yeah, it is.
Your area of expertise is on the commercial side. You're in commercial real estate.
Yep.
Has it always been that way? Did you start on the residential side outside of your own properties?
Mm-hmm.
And why commercial? What was the draw?
Yeah, I mean, I think so I did residential when I first got here because that seemed like, that was the focus of the company I started with at Berkshire. And it seemed like there's more volume that was happening of that. And so I'm like, okay, I understand the transaction process. I can figure out how to do this, and actually did fine. But I remember very distinctly, it was some house in the South Hills, and I was touring this lady through it, and she was asking me like, well, do you think my hutch would fit here or something? And I'm like, oh, I'm in the wrong, like, what am I doing? Like, I don't belong in this business. Like in selling houses, like, I don't care about your hutch, lady. Like it's like, I know it's very important to you. I just, it's like, that's my brain. I can tell you if it's a good deal or not. I can do the numbers. I can, do all that kind of stuff, negotiate it out. But the home side of like residential real estate, like I don't know. That's a bad thing to say, but it's just I didn't understand or care that much about that side of it. But the world of commercial real estate and development and all that kind of stuff is very like, where's the gap? Where's the cost to value, gap, and then how do you fill that?
Well, what is one of the misconceptions the general public have about commercial real estate? Because I think we're all aware, higher prices, higher taxes, higher property values. It's going to sit on the market longer. It's not going to sell as quickly. But what's the biggest misconception you?
I think if somebody's not accustomed to it, how the transaction process is different from a house. It's usually longer if you're selling a building, it usually takes a lot longer to sell those. Not all the time, but often. The due diligence process is very different. You're worried about environmental and all these different things, environmental concerns and making sure those are cleared up. I'd say another big misconception, and we make a distinction between residential real estate agents and commercial real estate agents. And it's when you have a residential real estate agent that brings, the state forms, you're like, okay, I bet this is going to be fun because there are due diligence things that you do when you represent a buyer or seller that are very different from commercial when you're doing a commercial transaction, because, for instance, if it's a investment property, especially if it's like an office building or something like that, most of what you're doing is evaluating how well the leases are written and then what the lease means for the value of that property. And so, we describe it to our agents as, commercial real estate is essentially just a basket to hold leases, and you need to really understand the ins and outs of leasing, or else you're not going to be very good at commercial real estate. So that I think when we deal with people that aren't in the day-to-day of leasing, they have a really hard time understanding value in commercial real estate, because it's not just looking at sales comps of like, an empty building. It's what does the lease or the collection of leases say? How does that then translate into value and how an investor would look at it and that sort of thing? So that's one of the main differences is that, and then, we'll deal with parties that don't do leasing very often, and you can tell by if it's a landlord that doesn't do it, you can you just see the lease written and you're like, you were just giving money away. Like you're just hurting yourself by how you have structured this lease. So I don't know. Those are the main differences, I guess, would come top of mind.
How did you learn all this when you transitioned from, residential to commercial? What was your breakthrough, I guess, and what helped you get going and get some momentum?
Yeah. I mean, it started with going to school for real estate, and like that, they teach you how to do underwriting and how to, build a financial model from scratch and all that kind of stuff. So like, it started a long time ago. And then over the course of, 12 years in the military, I bet I read 150 books on not all on real estate. A lot of them are on business in general, but you're constantly reading on those things. And so it just like embeds in your brain of like this, building a real estate model from scratch, no problem. Like you give me an Excel spreadsheet, give me an hour and I could build you one from scratch. That's pretty effective. But it's from reading a million books and then having some academic background, I guess, in it that definitely helped. And then when I got here, it's like I hadn't been in it like actively in a couple of years because it pretty hefty deployment schedule right before I moved here. But then there's something called CCIM training. So it's basically a trade organization that trains people how to do underwriting, and it's very commercial real estate focused. And so I got into that, got the designation pretty quickly, and they like teach you, exactly how to do this stuff to evaluate a property for investment real estate. And so that, and then, continue to go to conferences and books and read books and do these different things. And so I don't know when it like clicks, but at some point you're like, oh, I actually know the answer to most of these questions, like not all of them, but like most of the questions, or I have somebody I can call that I met at a conference or I met at a class or one of the instructors from CCIM or whatever. So that was that's where it came from. I don't know.
Matt, I want to change gears here a little bit. Growing up, Pennsylvania, Marines, real estate, you've taken multiple projects and careers from start to finish and had a roadmap. Have you ever thought about just building your own town?
It's funny you say that. Yeah.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did there. As a matter of fact, yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about this new endeavor, this new project.
Yeah. I guess the quick backstory where it came about is when I first moved here in 2015, was with Berkshire Hathaway for about 2 years, and then wanted to spend all my time on commercial and development work. So left Berkshire, started Sterling Commercial Real Estate. And one of the first people, actually even before I left, like one of the first people I hired is Sarah, who's still with us and has done a fantastic job of building this like research database. And that's been, so huge in like informing how we built the company out and how we advise clients and all that kind of stuff. But one of the, I think, interesting things that came out of that is, one, the training teaches you how to look at research, all this training and books and blah, blah, blah. Like, it teaches you how to look at research and data and then actually apply it to spot cost to value gaps. And one of the things that was very clear from paying attention to who's building what are the vacancy rates, what are the rental rates, how much does it cost to build, apartment building, how much it costs for office, and all these different things, is you can spot these pretty clear gaps that are coming, especially when you have this, what they call it, we call it a development pipeline. So it's paying attention and projecting into the future of projects that are being planned, that are actually in permitting right now or under construction. And so it basically allows you to predict the future of where things are going. So it looks like magic, but it's not magic. Like, 2 or 3 years ago, we do this event every year called Missoula Market Watch. And it's basically an hour and a half of us sitting up and talking about investment and development in Missoula. And, 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about apartments. And at the time, the vacancy rate was super low. But you could see there are a ton of apartments that were like coming into the pipeline. And so you can see how that will have an impact 2 years later. And sure enough, it's not magic. It's just how how it all plays out. So you can kind of predict what's going to happen to these different markets. And so in paying attention to development trends, you look at the cost of housing for sale, for instance, and then you look at what's in the development pipeline to create, new lots. So like building lots, going through this subdivision process and everything. And it's pretty clear, even like back in 2019, 2020, like we don't actually create enough new lots to keep up with population growth. And so that then creates a supply and demand imbalance, which means that it might not be right this second, but in all probability that the trend is moving towards where housing is going to become very expensive. And so you kind of watch this happen. And at this Market Watch event we host, we said it for years, like, go like build housing for sale. Like, there's not enough in the pipeline to keep up with it. And then you watch, especially after 2020, like where the housing prices went through the roof. So anyway, that's kind of the backstory to where you spot where the gap is. And then, part of it too is just having friends and even workers, people that you work with and work around that would like to purchase a home and can't do it because, the median home price is $550,000 or whatever it is. We were fortunate enough to have bought in 2018 is when we bought our first house. We rented for the first 3 years. So like I was fortunate to get a house before it got crazy. But now it's like, if you're young or if you, waited to try and get into the market, it's like pretty brutal.
Yeah, first time homeowners.
Tough here. It's ugly. So that entry level housing side of it, I guess that was part of the, interest in it. But, when you pay attention to the development pipeline, you're also paying attention to all the regulation that goes into development. And one of the things that the county did, Missoula County did 5 years ago, is they updated their growth policy, the land use policy. This is super boring stuff, except if you care about housing and the prices of housing. And when the county updated their growth policy, it designated this area by the Y for a town center, like basically building a new town out there. And so that was like the first regulatory like precursor to saying, okay, this is where we'd like to see development happen. And it makes all the sense in the world because you've got a job center out there. There's a bunch of employers. You got I-90 and 93. And so you have like some of that like basic ingredients that go into, baking this cake of how towns grow. So the county saw that, they designated the area. I'd moved out there, in 2018. So, north of the Y is where I live. And so we start to pay attention, like, all right, the county sees it growing out here. If I see land pop up, that's going to become real interesting, because if you can figure out how to work with the governing body as opposed to like going in to do a rezone or, fighting your entire way through, like that's a miserable existence. So it's paying attention to that. And then also by living out there, it's very clear that it's 20 minutes. If you want a, gallon of milk, like you're driving 20 minutes into town. So like there's clearly a gap for services out by the Y already. And so like that combination of like county says it wants a town center out here. There's a need, there's a gap in terms of like demand for retail services or hardware store, grocery store, or whatever. And then housing is a major problem. You can't find a way. People have a really hard time getting into housing. So long story short, I think it was like 3 years ago, this large property popped up on the market. And so started, walking around it with this iPad, or actually a previous iPad, and just an Onyx Maps, and started like tracing out like what do I think this thing could look like if we were to build a town center out here. And yeah, that was almost exactly 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And so it took about 4 months of playing with it, finally put an offer in on it. Took, 2.5 years of going through regulatory processes to get the subdivision approved for that project. But I guess the long and the short of it is it's a town center. I mean, it's a full town is what it will eventually be. I mean, this is going to be a 20+ year project, but a town center that's built around a 40-acre, market garden farm. Basically, this, the middle of it is this 40-acre functioning farm.
So you're bringing your Amish ties to Montana is what you're doing,
Yes,
Matt.
I am. That's right.
It sounds complex. I mean, landing that F-18s at night sounded easier than building a town. But wow.
Yeah. Why was that important to you? I mean, obviously, I know there's probably some financial gain of this as well, but what made you want to take on this endeavor?
That's a great question. I mean, part of it's the interest of having, if you can see the most like tangible need, and then if you are able to use the private sector to like solve problems. And I am a commercial real estate person. Like I'm not really in the home world, although the development work of like taking a large plot of land, cutting up to small chunks of land and reselling it, that's a super simple business model, very complex, but it's the precursor to building housing. And so like I have the skill set, there's a clear need for this. I think from a, social good standpoint of if you want to turn Missoula or Bozeman or wherever into a playground that's purely for the wealthy, then it's like you constrain your housing supply, and that's how you'll get it. And we're doing a pretty good job of that right now. So if you want to actually like have a market-based way of keeping Missoula a accessible place for everybody, for anybody to like have a stake in the game, to have like a, their foot in the door, or whatever cliche you want to throw at it, like some access to ownership in their community. I think the way that you do it is you create many avenues into ownership. And so there will be rental properties in this thing, but the focus is not so much on rental properties. It's more on homes for sale, and really like our main emphasis, we're trying for about 20% of the overall building stock is to build these entry-level homes that are, for somebody to get into. So they have the opportunity that I did when, I was fortunate to do it in 2018, but at least have the ability to get your foot in the door, to build equity. Sweat equity is a possibility when you actually own the property you live in. Prior to that, it's not, sweat equity is not a thing. So you need something to improve to start with. And so that is part of the, idea behind this thing, and where it all came from. So
final question from me as we close up here, Matt, what do you hope is the legacy of the development that you've been able to do here in Missoula? I mean, obviously, as you just said, wanting more affordable housing, but is there anything else that we missed in there as far as the legacy of your business and what you're trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't put my name on anything. It's like my name isn't on my company. Like it's named after somebody else. And I don't think I would ever name anything in these towns, like after me. So like, I don't see that as a legacy. I think when you build good places to live, that it has, it's like that. Yeah. I think that's like the best thing you can leave behind is like, if it's a place that people want to live and it's accessible to people like me, it's like people that grew up like I did and came here. It's like or if they grew up here and like want to own a piece of where they live, then I think giving that possibility to as many people as possible is, I think that is what I'm after. And, if you get the toured all kinds of places in the process, trying to design this thing, and just like, you can see when you walk around, both in America and a little bit in Europe and other places where you walk around, it's like, when you walk by somebody, like, what is the demeanor on their face? And like, are they playing with their kids? And do they have some, joy or happiness to them as they walk by? And it's like, it seemed like the places that were well designed and good places to live made for happier people. And so I'm like, if that is what this place is, Grass Valley Gardens is 20 years from now or 10 years from now or 5 years from now, it's like, then we succeeded, and that's what we're after. So anyway, that's the objective.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Matt, thanks so much.
Yeah.
For taking time out of your day and
Yeah.
coming in. Appreciate your stories. Appreciate your service
Yeah.
To our country. And just the impact you're making in Missoula.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yep.
What's up, Missoula? This is Nick Balla, producer of the Missoula Podcast. We truly appreciate you hanging out with us as we dive into the stories that make our city special. If you could do us a quick favor and follow the show wherever you are listening, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, maybe you're watching on YouTube, so hit that little subscribe button. It really helps us out. Head on over to www.themissoulapodcast.com for more information, and we'll see you next week.